Struggling man saved a drowning girl on a cruise and found out she owned the ship. On the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, fate was about to orchestrate an extraordinary encounter that would change two lives forever. James Cooper had scraped together every penny he had for this budget cruise, a desperate attempt to find peace amid his mounting debts and shattered dreams. Little did he know that his moment of escape would transform into the most pivotal decision of his life. From his weathered hands that had worked countless odd jobs to stay afloat, to his unflinching spirit that refused to break, James was a man who had always chosen dignity over defeat. But on that fateful evening, as the sunset painted the horizon, in brilliant hues of orange and gold, a terrified scream shattered the peaceful ambiance. There, thrashing in the merciless waves below, was a young woman moments away from disappearing beneath the surface. What happened next would not only save her life, but would unravel a secret that would shake the very foundation of their different worlds. This isn't just a tale of rescue, it's a story about how one selfless act of courage would bridge the gap between struggle and success, between an ordinary man and an extraordinary destiny. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. James Cooper stood at the railing of the majestic dawn, his calloused hands gripping the cool metal as he watched wealthy passengers stroll past in their designer clothes. 5 years ago, he would have been wearing Italian leather shoes instead of the worn-out boots that had carried him through countless shifts at 3 different jobs. He would have been the one casually discussing investment portfolios over champagne, not the man who counted every dollar twice before spending it on the ship's most basic amenities. His small business, Cooper's Custom Furniture, had been more than just a source of income. It had been his father's legacy. For 15 years, he had poured his heart into crafting bespoke pieces that transformed houses into homes. The workshop's rich scent of cedar and maple had been his morning coffee, the hum of sanders and saws his daily symphony. Each piece that left his shop carried not just his name, but his pride, a testament to the craftsmanship his father had taught him since he was old enough to hold a chisel. Then came the recession, followed by the rise of mass-produced furniture. Chains. His loyal customers dwindled, replaced by bargain hunters who couldn't understand why his handcrafted dining table cost 10 times more than the assembly line version at the mega store. The bills piled up like sawdust on his workshop floor. Rent, supplies, employee wages, and finally the crushing weight of loan payments he couldn't meet. Bankruptcy wasn't just a financial state. It was an identity he never thought he'd carry. The day he locked the workshop door for the last time, he left behind more than just tools and timber. He left behind the dream his father had entrusted to him, the legacy he was supposed to preserve and pass on. Now, at 35, James worked as a handyman during the day, a restaurant dishwasher in the evenings, and a security guard on weekends. Sleep had become a luxury he could rarely afford, and relaxation was a foreign concept, until Sarah, his younger sister, had surprised him with this cruise ticket. "You need this, James," she had insisted, pressing the envelope into his hands. 7 days to breathe, to think about something other than survival. Please do this for me. Her eyes had held that same determination their father used to show when he knew he was right, and James found himself unable to refuse. The cruise was the cheapest available, booked months in advance during the off-season. His cabin was deep. In the ship's belly, a windowless box that barely fit a bed and a desk. But after months of working 18-hour days, even this cramped space felt like a luxury. As he wandered the ship's decks, James couldn't help but notice the invisible lines that separated passengers like him from those in the premium suites. It wasn't just about the restricted areas marked elite access only, or the special lounges reserved for premium guests. It was in the way some passengers looked through him as if he were part of the ship's furniture, in the dismissive glances at his discount store clothing, in the assumptions made when he mentioned he was staying in the interior cabin section. A group of passengers in evening wear brushed past him, their laughter carrying the carefree note of those who had never worried about making rent. James stepped aside, pressing himself against the railing to let them pass. Their perfume lingered in the air, an expensive cloud that seemed to mock his bargain cologne. He pulled out his phone, checking the reminder he'd set for the free activities available to all passengers. The premium events, wine tastings, cooking, classes, exclusive shows were beyond his budget. But there were still pools, basic entertainment, and vast ocean views that cost nothing extra to enjoy. He had promised Sarah he would try to relax, to use this time to think about his future beyond the next bill payment. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, James found a quiet spot on the deck where he could watch the waves without. Feeling like an intruder in someone else's world, the ocean, at least, didn't care about bank accounts or social status. Its endless expanse held the same mystery and majesty for everyone who gazed upon it. A server appeared with a tray of champagne glasses, offering them to nearby passengers. When he reached James, there was a slight hesitation, a quick assessment of his casual attire. James politely declined before the server could decide whether to offer him one. He didn't need the reminder that he was an outsider here, a working-class man temporarily inhabiting a world of luxury he couldn't afford. Yet as he watched the sky paint itself in brilliant oranges and pinks, James felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate kind that had him checking his mailbox for miracles during the bankruptcy, but a quiet, peaceful sort. Perhaps Sarah was right. Perhaps these 7 days would offer more than just a break from his routine. Perhaps somewhere between the endless horizon and the star-filled nights, he would find a new direction for his life. Little did he know that fate had already set in motion events that would test not just his strength and courage, but his very understanding of what it meant to be wealthy or poor, successful or struggling. As the last rays of sunlight kissed the waves, James Cooper was exactly where he needed to be, though he didn't know it yet. Elena Morgan adjusted the simple sundress she'd chosen for her incognito cruise, ensuring the designer label was carefully hidden. At 28, she was the secret owner of Morgan Cruise Lines, though only a handful of board members knew this. Truth. To the world, she was merely the absent niece of shipping magnate Theodore Morgan, who supposedly ran the company. In reality, her uncle was just a figurehead, her father's final business arrangement before his unexpected death 2 years ago. The weight of her father's empire rested on her shoulders like an invisible crown, one that grew heavier with each passing day. Harvard Business School hadn't prepared her for the loneliness of secret leadership, for the exhaustion of maintaining a careful facade while making decisions that affected thousands of employees' lives. She'd boarded the Majestic, Dawn, her own ship, as Elena Collins, a middle-class marketing consultant from Boston. No premium suite, no special treatment, no entourage. Just a standard cabin and a chance to understand the business from the ground up, something her father had always insisted was crucial for true leadership. You can't lead what you don't understand, he used to say, his voice firm but kind. Every position matters, every employee counts, every guest experience shapes our future. These words echoed in her mind as she observed the daily operations from a guest's perspective, taking mental notes about everything from the breakfast service to the entertainment schedule. The crew had no idea they were serving their actual boss. She watched them work, noting their genuine smiles and occasional stressed moments, seeing the human side of the operations statistics she usually reviewed in spreadsheets. In the 3 days since the cruise began, she'd identified dozens of small improvements that could enhance both guest and employee experience. Insights she never would have gained from her office in the corporate headquarters. But it wasn't all business. For the first time since her father's death, Elena felt something close to freedom. No board meetings, no urgent calls, no endless parade of people wanting something from her. Here she was just another face in the crowd, and it was intoxicating. She'd even made a friend, Sarah from the spa, who treated her like any other guest, sharing gossip about celebrity passengers and recommending the best times to visit the pool to avoid crowds. The genuine interaction was refreshing after years of carefully calculated relationships in the corporate world. Yet her temporary escape had a deadline. In 1 week, she would need to make a decision that would affect not just her future, but the future of Morgan Cruise Lines. The board was pushing for a merger with their biggest competitor, Oceanic Ventures, to be sealed through her marriage to their CEO's son, Marcus Sterling. On paper, it was the perfect business arrangement. The merger would create the largest cruise line in the world, securing thousands of jobs and generating billions in revenue. Marcus was handsome, educated, and as committed to the industry as she was. The press would love it. The joining of two cruise line dynasties, a modern-day corporate fairy tale. But Elena wanted more than a business arrangement disguised as a marriage. She wanted what her parents had shared, a true partnership built on love, understanding, and shared dreams. Her mother, before passing away when Elena was 12, had made her promise never to settle for less. Standing at the ship's railing, Elena watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. A group of premium passengers walked past, their conversation drifting her way, something about the stock market and property investments. In her real life, she would have been expected to join such discussions, to network and maintain her family's social connections. Instead, she remained quietly observing, invisible in her carefully chosen ordinary clothes. The ocean breeze carried the faint scent of salt and freedom, making her wish she could stretch this moment of anonymity indefinitely. Below, the waves crashed against the ship's hull, a rhythmic reminder of the power and unpredictability of the sea. Much like life itself, she mused. You never knew what the next wave might bring. A movement caught her eye, a man in worn boots and simple clothes, leaning against the railing a few meters away. There was something compelling about his solitude, about the way he gazed at the horizon as if searching for answers in the distance. She'd noticed him before, always slightly apart from the other passengers, carrying himself with a quiet dignity that seemed at odds with his obvious financial constraints. Elena found herself wondering about his story, about what brought him to this cruise. It was the kind of human detail she'd been seeking on this undercover journey, the real experiences of the passengers who entrusted their vacations to her company. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the deck, Elena made her way to the ship's stern. She needed time alone to think, to clear her head before returning to her cabin to review the notes she'd been secretly taking about potential improvements to the guest experience. The upcoming board meeting would require every insight she could gather. Little did she know that fate was about to dramatically alter her carefully laid plans. In less than an hour, her life would change, forever, and the man in the worn boots would prove to be far more significant than just another passenger observation in her notes. The evening air had grown cooler as darkness crept across the sky, sending most passengers inside for dinner or the evening's entertainment. Elena walked along the nearly deserted stern deck, her mind heavy with thoughts of the impending merger. The gentle vibration of the ship's engines hummed beneath her feet as she approached the railing, wanting one last look at the twilight ocean before heading to her cabin. As she leaned forward to watch the wake trailing behind the ship, a sudden, powerful gust of wind whipped across the deck. Her light sundress billowed, and the notebook she'd been carrying, filled with her private observations about the cruise line, slipped from her grasp. Without thinking, Elena lunged for it, her fingers grasping empty air as her momentum carried her forward. Her hip caught the railing, and in a horrifying instant she felt herself pitching over the edge. The scream that tore from her throat was cut short as she plunged into the churning waters below. The cold hit her like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs. The ship's massive wake tumbled her like a rag doll, disorienting her until she couldn't tell up from down. Her dress tangled around her legs as she fought to surface, each desperate kick seeming to drag her further down instead of up. James had been walking back to his cabin when he heard the scream. His body reacted before his mind could process what was happening, feet already running toward the sound as he scanned the darkness. The splash had barely registered when he caught sight of a pale form in the water, rapidly falling behind the moving ship. "Man overboard!" His voice boomed across the deck as he kicked off his boots, years of summer lifeguarding at the local pool flooding back to him. "Portside stern! Someone alert the bridge!" He didn't wait to see if anyone heard. The ship was still moving, each second carrying them further from the drowning woman. Without hesitation, James vaulted over the railing, arms tucked tight against his body as he aimed his dive to clear the ship's substantial wake. The impact with the water drove the breath from his lungs, the cold shocking his system, but training kicked in and he surfaced quickly, orienting himself toward where he'd last seen the woman. The ship's lights were already beginning to fade as it continued its forward journey, though he could hear alarmed voices carrying across the water and the sound of an alarm beginning to blare. There, a flash of pale fabric in the darkness. James struck out with powerful strokes, fighting against the waves that threatened to separate them further. He could see her struggling now, movements becoming weaker as exhaustion and cold set in. Her head slipped beneath the surface just as he reached her position. Taking a deep breath, James dove. The salt water stung his eyes as he searched the darkness, hands reaching out blindly until they contacted fabric. He grabbed hold and pulled, kicking hard toward the surface. They broke through together, Elena gasping and coughing as James rapped, one arm around her chest in a rescue hold. "I've got you," he assured her, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Just breathe. I've got you." Elena was trembling violently, whether from cold or shock he couldn't tell. Can't swim well," she managed between chattering teeth. "You don't have to. That's what I'm here for." James maintained the rescue position, keeping them both afloat as he scanned for the ship. It had finally begun to turn, a maneuver that would take precious time given its size. In the distance, he could see a rescue boat being lowered. The waves rose and fell around them, each swell threatening to submerge them. James could feel the cold beginning to seep into his muscles, but he kept his grip firm and his kicks steady. Elena's breathing had steadied somewhat, though she remained rigidly tense in his hold. "Talk to me," he encouraged, knowing he needed to keep her conscious and alert. "What's your name?" "Elena," she managed. "Elena Moore, Collins. Elena Collins." "I'm James. Just keep talking, Elena. Help is coming." He could see the rescue boat approaching now, its spotlight sweeping the waves. "Little longer. You're doing great." Minutes that felt like hours passed before the rescue boat reached them. Strong hands reached down, first pulling Elena aboard, then James. As blankets were wrapped around them both, the full impact of what had just happened began to sink. In the rescue boat's return to the ship was met with a crowd of concerned passengers and crew. As they helped Elena onto the deck, a distinguished-looking older man in a captain's uniform pushed through the crowd, his face ashen. "Miss Morgan, are you all right?" The silence that fell was deafening. James, still dripping and wrapped in a blanket, watched as Elena's posture changed subtly, authority settling over her shoulders like a cloak, despite her bedraggled appearance. "I'm fine, Captain Reynolds," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent deck. "Thanks to this gentleman's quick action." She turned to James, their eyes meeting with an intensity that made the rest of the world fade away. For a moment, the captain's next words shattered any illusion of normalcy. "Someone alert Mr. Theodore immediately. His niece, the owner of Morgan Cruise Lines, nearly drowned on our watch." James felt as though he'd been plunged back into the cold ocean. Owner? The woman he'd just rescued owned the entire cruise line? His mind struggled to reconcile the simple sundress and friendly demeanor with this new information. Elena was looking at him still, something like apology in her eyes. Before either of them could speak, medical staff surrounded them both, insisting on immediate examinations. As they were led away in different directions, James caught one last glimpse of Elena looking back at him, her expression a complex mixture of gratitude, concern, and something else he couldn't quite identify. The night's events had lasted less than 30 minutes, but as James followed the medical team to the infirmary, he knew with absolute certainty that his life had just changed. Forever. He just wasn't sure yet if it was for better or worse. News of the rescue spread through the majestic dawn like wildfire. By midnight, every passenger and crew member had heard some version of how the mysterious owner of Morgan Cruise Lines had been saved by a man from the budget cabins. The ship's Wi-Fi network strained under the surge of social media posts, each telling a slightly different version of events. James sat on the edge of a bed in the ship's medical center, still wrapped in a blanket, despite having changed into dry clothes. Brought by an eager crew member, the doctor had cleared him physically, but insisted he stay for observation. Through the thin curtain separating the treatment areas, he could hear the flurry of activity surrounding Elena in the next space. "Miss Morgan, please, you must rest," a nurse pleaded. "I will rest." Elena's voice was firm but gentle. "After I speak with him." Footsteps approached, and the curtain drew back to reveal Elena, now dressed in silk pajamas and a plush robe that probably cost more than James's entire wardrobe. Her face was still pale, but she carried herself with a quiet dignity that commanded attention. "Mr. Cooper," she began, then softened. "James, I owe you my life." Before he could respond, the door burst open. A tall man in an expensive suit strode in, followed by several equally well-dressed individuals. James recognized him from photos in the cruise brochure. Theodore Morgan, the supposed head of the company. "Elena, what were you thinking?" Theodore's voice carried the sharp edge of barely contained panic. "Wandering around unescorted? Do you have any idea what could have happened if this man hadn't been there?" Elena cut in, her tone arctic. "Yes, uncle, I'm quite aware, which is why I'm trying to thank him properly." The tension in the room crackled as uncle and niece stared each other down. James felt increasingly uncomfortable, like a prop in someone else's drama. "I should go." He started to stand, but Elena's hand on his arm stopped him. "Please don't." She turned to address the room at large. "I would appreciate some privacy with Mr. Cooper. We can discuss everything else in the morning." Theodore looked like he wanted to object, but something in Elena's expression made him think better of it. With obvious reluctance, he and his entourage withdrew, leaving James and Elena alone, save for a discreet security guard by the door. "I'm sorry," Elena sighed, sinking into a chair beside James's bed. "Both for the dramatics just now, and for deceiving you earlier. I don't make a habit of lying about who I am. You had your reasons, I'm sure." James shifted awkwardly, hyper-aware of the contrast between her elegant attire and his borrowed crew sweats. "I did. Good ones, I thought. I wanted to understand the real experience of our passengers, not the carefully curated version I usually see." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "But none of that matters right now. What matters is that I'm alive because of you, and I need to know how to repay that debt." James felt his pride bristle. "There's no debt. Anyone would have, but they didn't," she interrupted gently. "You did. And we both know not everyone would have. The security footage shows at least 3 other people on that deck who did nothing but shout for help." He hadn't known that, and the information sat uncomfortably in his stomach. "Still, I don't need a reward." Elena smiled slightly. "No, I don't imagine you do. That's precisely why you deserve one." She paused, studying his face. "The crew told me you're staying in one of the interior cabins. Please, at least let me upgrade you to a suite for the remainder of the cruise." The offer was generous. Exactly. The kind of luxury he'd been watching others enjoy from a distance. But something in him rebelled against accepting charity, even earned charity. I appreciate the offer, but I'm fine where I am. Elena's expression shifted, becoming more businesslike. Mr. Cooper, you saved the owner of this cruise line from drowning. If you won't accept an upgrade for yourself, accept it for me. The press will be all over this story by morning, and it will look rather odd if our hero is staying in the most basic accommodations we offer. She had him there, and from her slight smile, she knew it. James felt a reluctant admiration for her tactical shift from gratitude to practical business concerns. When you put it that way, he conceded. Excellent. She stood, swaying slightly. James half rose to steady her, but she waved him off. I'm fine. Just tired. Someone will come to help you move to your new suite within the hour. She moved toward the door, then paused. And James? Thank you. Not just for the rescue, but for treating me like a normal person when you thought I was one. After she left, James lay back on the medical bed staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed continuously with messages from Sarah, who had somehow already heard about his aquatic heroics. The crew members who passed through kept giving him awed her looks, and he could hear them whispering in the hallway. His simple vacation had become something else entirely, and he wasn't sure how to feel about it. The memory of Elena's weight in his arms as he kept them both afloat, the trust in her voice when she told him she couldn't swim well, the way she'd stood up to her uncle, it all swirled in his mind, making sleep impossible. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. A crew member entered bearing not just directions to his new suite, but a complete new wardrobe. "Compliments of Miss Morgan," the young man said, barely containing his excitement at serving the ship's new celebrity. James looked at the designer labels and had to suppress a groan. It seemed Elena Morgan wasn't going to make it easy for him to maintain his pride. As he followed the crew member to his new suite, he couldn't help wondering what other ripples this night's events would create in the carefully structured worlds of both the rescuer and the rescued. The next morning, James woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, a stark contrast to his former windowless cabin. His new suite was larger than his entire apartment back home, with a private balcony, living area, and a bathroom that felt more like a spa. The bed was so comfortable that he'd slept through his usual dawn wake-up, his body finally surrendering to the exhaustion from the previous night's events. A gentle knock at the door revealed a crew member with a breakfast cart. "Compliments of Miss Morgan, sir," the man said, wheeling in an array of covered dishes. "She thought you might prefer breakfast in your suite this morning, given the attention in the dining room." James approached the balcony as the crew member quietly sat. At breakfast. Below, he could see photographers on the dock. The ship had docked at their first port of call overnight, their long lenses aimed at the vessel's upper decks. Several news vans were parked nearby, their satellite dishes reaching skyward. "Is there anything else you need, Mr. Cooper?" The crew member's solicitous tone made James uncomfortable. Yesterday, in his budget cabin, he'd been lucky to get a nod of acknowledgement. "No, thank you," he managed, waiting until the door closed before approaching the elaborate breakfast spread. Fresh fruits, pastries, eggs Benedict, premium coffee. It was more luxury than he'd allowed himself in years. His phone buzzed with another message from Sarah. "You're trending on Twitter. Call me." He ignored it, instead picking up the morning's copy of the ship's daily newsletter that had been delivered. With breakfast, his own face stared back at him from the front page. A hastily acquired photo from the ship's embarking records paired with the headline, "Hero Passenger Saves Cruise Line Owner in Daring Rescue." A soft knock interrupted his reading. This time, when he opened the door, Elena stood there, impeccably dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than his yearly rent. "Good morning," she smiled, though he could see the fatigue lingering in her eyes. "May I come in? I thought we should talk before you face the masses." James gestured her inside, suddenly very aware that he was still in the provided pajamas. "I should change. Please be comfortable. This isn't a formal meeting." She moved to the balcony, looking down at the media circus below. "Though I'm Afraid formal meetings are in your immediate future. The press wants interviews, the board wants to make a statement, and our marketing team sees this as a golden opportunity. A golden opportunity for what? James asked, though he had a sinking feeling he knew. Elena turned back to face him. For a story. The struggling, heroic passenger who saved the cruise line heiress. It's irresistible to the media. They're already running with it, but we'd prefer to control the narrative. And what narrative would that be? He couldn't keep the edge from his voice. Elena's expression softened. The truth, James, that a brave, capable man acted without hesitation to save someone in need, asking nothing in return. That kind of genuine heroism is rare. She paused, studying his face. But that's not what you're worried about, is it? I'm not interested in being a publicity stunt. No, I don't imagine you are. She moved to the breakfast table, pouring coffee for them both with practiced elegance. But you might be interested in a job. The coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. What? We need someone with real-world experience and practical knowledge to help improve our guest services, particularly for our standard-class passengers. Someone who understands both excellent craftsmanship and business operations. Someone like you. James set the cup down carefully. You've had me investigated. Of course I did. Cooper's Custom Furniture had an excellent reputation before the market shifted. Your employees spoke very highly of you, even those you had to let go. That says something about your character. The mention of his failed business stung, but Elena wasn't done. I also know you've worked 3 jobs rather than declare personal bankruptcy, that you've nearly paid off your business debts, and that you haven't missed a single payment to your former employees' severance packages, even when it meant skipping meals yourself. You're very thorough, he said stiffly. I have to be. She sipped her coffee, watching him over the rim. The offer is real, James. A position as guest experience consultant, working directly with our operations team. Your perspective would be invaluable. The salary she named made him choke on his coffee. It was more money than he'd made even in his best years running the furniture shop. Why? He managed finally. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you didn't hesitate to risk your life for a stranger. I know you've maintained your integrity through difficult times. And I know you see things others miss. You proved that last night when you spotted me in the water, while others didn't. She stood, smoothing her already perfect suit. Think about it. In the meantime, there's a press conference at 11. Wear the blue suit that was delivered. It works well with the company colors. She moved to the door, then paused. And James, thank you again, not just for the rescue, but for treating me like a normal person when you thought I was one. After she left, James walked out onto the balcony, letting the sea breeze wash over him. Below, the photographer's cameras clicked rapidly, capturing the man they dubbed a hero. But all he could think about was the way Elena had known exactly how to tempt him, not with charity or rewards, but with a genuine opportunity to rebuild his life on his own terms. He looked down at his worn hands, calloused from years of crafting furniture and now from endless hours of manual labor. They were the hands of a worker, not an executive. Yet Elena had seen something in him worth investing in, something beyond last night's rescue. The blue suit hung in the closet, a silent reminder that his world had irrevocably changed. The question was, would he change with it? The press conference was exactly as uncomfortable as James had feared. Dressed in the tailored blue suit that fit him suspiciously well, he stood beside Elena as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. The ship's grand ballroom had been transformed into a media center with the Morgan Cruise Line's logo prominently displayed behind them. Mr. Cooper, how does it feel to be a hero? Miss Morgan, will this incident affect company safety policies? Is there any truth to rumors of a romantic connection? Elena handled the reporters with practiced grace, deflecting personal questions while emphasizing the company's commitment to passenger safety. James tried to keep his responses brief and modest, but he could feel the narrative being shaped around him. The working-class hero who'd rescued the wealthy heiress. I just did what anyone would do, he repeated for what felt like the 100th time. But they didn't, did they? A sharp-voiced reporter pressed. Our sources say several premium class passengers witnessed the incident but took no action. Would you say this reflects a broader divide between social classes on luxury cruises? Before James could respond, he felt Elena's hand touch his arm lightly. I think, she said smoothly, that Mr. Cooper's actions reflect his individual character, rather than any social commentary. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a luncheon to attend. The luncheon, it turned out, was with the ship's board members and several major shareholders who happened to be on board. James found himself seated between a hedge fund manager and a real estate mogul, picking at expertly prepared seafood while trying to follow conversations about market trends and merger strategies. Quite a fortune-changing moment for you, eh? The hedge fund manager, Anderson, smiled without warmth, rather like winning the lottery, I'd imagine. I wasn't looking for a fortune, James replied evenly, noting how Elena, seated across the table, had tensed slightly. No? Then you wouldn't be interested in the investment opportunities I could offer. A man in your sudden position should think about his future. My future was doing fine before last night. The words came out sharper than intended, drawing several pairs of eyes. Come now, Anderson persisted. Surely you're not planning to return to... He waved his hand vaguely. Whatever it was you were doing before? Elena's voice cut through the awkward moment. Mr. Cooper owned a highly respected custom furniture business. In fact, I believe there's a Cooper piece in your Hampton Beach House, Anderson. That magnificent oak dining table? Anderson's face flickered with recognition. That was your work, but it cost... He stopped abruptly, realizing the implication. Yes, Elena continued pleasantly. James's pieces were quite sought after before. The market shift, which is one reason we're discussing bringing his expertise to our guest services division. The conversation shifted, but James caught the calculating looks being exchanged around the table. To them, he was either a lucky opportunist or a charity case, neither option sitting well with his pride. Later, escaping to his suite's balcony, James loosened the tie that felt increasingly like a noose. The afternoon sun glinted off the ocean. Indifferent to the social currents swirling around him, they can be rather overwhelming, can't they? Elena's voice came from behind him. He hadn't heard her approach. They live in a different world. So do I, she said quietly, moving to stand beside him at the railing. But that doesn't mean I belong there entirely. James turned to look at her. The polished corporate facade had slipped slightly, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. You handle it well. I was trained to from birth. Doesn't mean I always enjoy it. She sighed, leaning on the railing. Do you know what I was doing on the stern deck last night? He shook his head. I was writing notes about how to make our standard class experiences better, about how to bridge the gap between passengers like Anderson and passengers who save up all year for a basic cabin. She smiled wryly. Ironic, isn't it? Why do you care? The question came out before he could stop it. Because my father taught me that true wealth isn't about having money. It's about creating value for others. She straightened up. That's why I want you for this position, James, not out of gratitude or publicity, but because you understand both worlds. You've built luxury furniture and worked minimum wage jobs. You see what people like Anderson miss. And what about what I miss? He gestured to the luxury around them. I don't belong in this world, Elena. No one does at first. I didn't, even though I was born into it. We all have to find our own way. She met his eyes steadily. The question is, are you willing to try? Or is your pride worth more than the chance to make a real difference? The question hit home, making him uncomfortable with its accuracy. His pride had been both shield and burden since losing his business. It had kept him going through hard times, but was it now holding him back? I need time to think, he said finally. Of course. She turned to leave, then paused. Just remember, James, Sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest thing you can do. Left alone, James watched the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. Below, photographers still lingered, hoping to catch another glimpse of the unlikely pair who'd captured the public's imagination. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with another message from Sarah, probably asking about the press conference she'd undoubtedly watched online. Everything was moving too fast, changing too quickly. Yet Elena's words echoed in his mind. Was he letting pride stand in the way of opportunity, or was he right to be cautious about entering a world so different from everything he'd known? The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in colors no furniture. Maker could hope to match, while James Cooper stood at the intersection of two worlds, trying to decide which path to take. That evening, unable to sleep, James found himself wandering the ship's upper decks. The night air was cool, and most passengers had retired to their cabins or the indoor entertainment venues. He paused at a quiet spot near the bow, remembering how different everything had felt just 2 nights ago when he'd stood in almost the same place in his worn boots and discount store clothes. Couldn't sleep either? Elena's voice startled him. She had appeared silently beside him, dressed casually in yoga pants and an oversized sweater. A striking departure from her corporate attire. Too much on my mind, he admitted. Follow me, she said suddenly. I want to show you something. Curious, James followed as she led him through a series of crew passages and up several flights of stairs. They emerged onto a small, private deck area he hadn't known existed, hidden away from the usual passenger spaces. My secret spot, Elena explained, settling onto a cushioned bench. Found it when I was 12, exploring the first ship my father built. Every Morgan vessel has one, a quiet place away from everything. James sat beside her, noticing how the spot offered a perfect view of both the stars above and the moonlit ocean below. Your father built cruise ships? Built this company from nothing, she nodded. Started as a deckhand, worked his way up. Everyone forgets that part now, sees only what the company became. She hugged her knees to her chest, looking suddenly young and vulnerable. He used to bring me here when things got overwhelming, remind me that the ocean doesn't care about stock prices or board meetings. Sounds like a wise man. He was. Her voice softened with memory. You remind me of him sometimes. That same quiet determination, the focus on craftsmanship and doing things right. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. Finally, James spoke. Tell me about the job. The real version, not the corporate pitch. Elena straightened, energy flowing back into her posture. We're losing touch with our core passengers, the ones who save all year for a basic cabin, who deserve just as magical an experience as the premium guests. I want to revamp our entire approach to standard class services, but I need someone who understands both quality and accessibility. And you think that's me because I made expensive furniture? I think that's you because you made beautiful things that lasted, things people saved for because they were worth it. And because now you know what it's like to be on the other side, to be the one saving up. She turned to face him fully. The furniture in your old showroom cost more than a premium suite on this ship, but people bought it because you made them understand its value. That's what I want. Someone who can help us deliver real value at every price point. James considered. Your board won't like changes that cut into profits. Let me worry about the board. Her eyes sparkled with something like mischief. Besides, happy passengers become loyal passengers. It's good business sense. You've thought this through. I've had time. I've been watching you since you boarded, you know. At his surprised look, she explained. Not specifically you, but passengers like you, the ones who work hard for their vacation, who appreciate every moment. I saw you that first day, helping an elderly couple with their luggage when the porter was overwhelmed. James remembered the moment, a simple act of kindness he hadn't thought anyone had noticed. You see a lot from behind your disguise. I see what matters. She stood, walking to the railing. That's what Dad taught me. Elena, he'd say, anyone can count money, The trick is counting the moments that make people's dreams come true. The moonlight caught her profile, and James was struck by how different she seemed here, away from the corporate spotlight. Not just the CEO's daughter or the company owner, but a woman with her own dreams and doubts. "What about your dreams?" he asked quietly. She turned, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "All you've talked about is your father's vision, the company's needs. What does Elena want?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She was quiet for so long that James thought she might not answer. "I want," she began slowly, "to make something of my own. Not just preserve what Dad built, but build something new, something that matters." She laughed softly. "Sounds silly, doesn't it? Poor little rich girl wanting to make a difference." "No," James said firmly. "It sounds human." Their eyes met, and for a moment all the barriers of class and circumstance seemed to fade away. They were just two people under the stars, sharing dreams and doubts. "It's getting late," Elena said finally, though she made no move to leave. "The board meets tomorrow to discuss the merger proposal, the one you don't want." She looked at him sharply. "What makes you say that?" "Just observation. You talk about building something new, not combining something old." A slow smile spread across her face. "Very perceptive, Mr. Cooper. Maybe you should come to the meeting. Share some of those observations. Now you're just trying to make the board hate me." They both laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet deck. When the laughter faded, Elena touched his arm lightly. "Think about the job, James. Really think about it. Not as charity or a reward, but as a chance to build something meaningful." She stepped back, heading toward the stairs. "You know where to find me when you decide." James stayed on the hidden deck long after she left, watching the moon's reflection dance on the waves. For the first time since losing his business, he felt the stirring of real purpose, not just survival or pride, but the chance to create something valuable. The ocean stretched endlessly before him, a reminder that some boundaries were meant to be crossed, some barriers meant to be broken. He just had to decide if he was ready to take that leap. The next morning dawned bright and clear, but James's peaceful mood from the previous night's conversation was shattered by an urgent knock at his suite door. A crew member handed him a tablet with the morning's digital news displayed. The headline made his stomach drop. "Cruise line heiress's secret engagement revealed. Morgan Sterling merger to be sealed with wedding bells." The article detailed how Elena Morgan was allegedly engaged to Marcus Sterling, heir to Oceanic Ventures, their biggest competitor. The merger, reportedly worth billions, would create the largest cruise line company in the world. Below was a photo of Elena at a gala event months ago, standing beside a handsome man in an expensive suit, both of them smiling for the cameras. James sat heavily on the edge of his bed, the tablet slipping from his fingers onto the plush carpet. The previous night's conversation took on a different meaning now. Her reluctance to discuss her own dreams, her cryptic comments about the merger. He felt like a fool. A second knock came, more insistent this time. Theodore Morgan stood in the hallway, his expression grave. "Mr. Cooper, the board requests your presence at this morning's meeting, immediately." The boardroom was a study in tension when James arrived. Elena sat at the head of the table, her corporate mask firmly in place, though he noticed her knuckles were white where she gripped her pen. Around the table sat various board members, including Anderson from the previous day's luncheon. A video screen on the wall showed additional board members joining remotely. And there, seated directly opposite, Elena, was Marcus Sterling himself, who must have flown in overnight. He was even more polished in person than in the photos, radiating the easy confidence of someone who had never heard the word no. "Mr. Cooper," Marcus rose, extending his hand with practiced charm. "I must thank you for saving my fiancée. Though I do wish someone had informed me of the incident directly, rather than through the press." This last comment was directed at Elena with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I wasn't aware there was a fiancé to inform," James replied evenly, ignoring the offered hand. He saw Elena's slight flinch, and several board members shift uncomfortably. Yes, well, Theodore Morgan cleared his throat. That's partly why we're here. The merger announcement was meant to coincide with the formal engagement announcement next week. Recent events have accelerated our timeline and created an opportunity, Anderson added eagerly. The public loves a good romance, a heroic rescue followed by a fairy tale wedding and historic merger. The publicity practically writes itself. James felt sick. He turned to Elena, but she was staring fixedly at the papers before her, her face unreadable. Of course, Marcus continued smoothly. We'll want to handle the narrative carefully. Can't have people thinking our bride was trying to escape her fate by jumping overboard. He laughed, and several board members joined in nervously. She didn't jump. James's voice cut through the laughter. She was writing notes about improving passenger experience when she fell, notes that were probably lost in the ocean along with any chance of their implementation. Silence fell over the room. Elena's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of surprise and something else, gratitude perhaps, or regret. Yes, well, Marcus waved dismissively. Passenger experience initiatives can be discussed after the merger. Right now, we need to focus on the announcement. Mr. Cooper, we'll need you to sign some NDAs and agree to certain public statements about the incident. You want me to lie? James asked bluntly. We want you to understand the bigger picture, Theodore interjected. This merger will secure thousands of jobs, create countless opportunities. Surely you can appreciate the importance of stability given your own business history. The jab stung, but before James could respond, Elena stood abruptly. That's enough. Her voice was quiet but carried an authority that silenced the room. James isn't here to be manipulated or threatened. He's here because I intend to offer him a position as head of guest experience innovation, reporting directly to me. Marcus laughed again, but this time there was an edge to it. Darling, you can't be serious. This man is a failed furniture maker who happened to be in the right place at the right time. This man, Elena's voice could have frozen the Caribbean, sees what we've all forgotten, that every passenger on our ships deserves a chance at a dream vacation, not just those in premium suites. That quality and accessibility aren't mutually exclusive. That sometimes the best view of a company's strengths and weaknesses comes from someone who's experienced both sides. She turned to James, her professional mask cracking slightly. I'm sorry you had to find out about the engagement this way. I should have told you last night, but up there, under the stars, she trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. The job offer stands, regardless of your answer now. James looked around the room, at the board members' calculating expressions, at Theodore's barely concealed anxiety, at Marcus's growing anger, and finally at Elena, standing alone at the head of the table, fighting for something she believed. You're right, he said quietly. I have experienced both sides, which is why I know when something's wrong, even if it looks perfect on paper. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. By the way, I declined interviews with 3 morning shows today. You might want to handle those quickly before they run with speculation instead. The boardroom erupted into chaos behind him as he walked away, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Through the closing door, he heard Elena's voice rise above the din. This meeting is adjourned. Marcus, we need to talk. Privately. James made it back to his suite before his composure cracked. He stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, at the expensive suit that suddenly felt like a costume, at the setting that felt like an elaborate stage for someone else's drama. His phone buzzed, a message from Sarah. Just saw the news. You okay? He wasn't sure how to answer that. How could he explain that in less than 3 days he'd gone from struggling handyman to heroic rescuer, to unwitting participant in a corporate chess game? How could he tell her that somewhere between the rescue and this morning's revelation, He'd started to feel something for a woman who was not only out of his league, but apparently engaged to someone else. The ocean stretched out beyond his balcony, as vast and indifferent as ever. Somewhere out there floated Elena's notebook, her real dreams sinking into the depths while her predetermined future rushed toward her like an oncoming tide. The afternoon brought a storm. Both literally and figuratively, rain lashed against the ship's windows as James paced his suite, trying to decide his next move. The media was in a frenzy, with speculation about the love triangle spreading across social media like wildfire. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing with interview requests and messages from reporters seeking comment. A knock at the door revealed an unexpected visitor. Catherine Chen, Elena's personal assistant, clutching a thick folder and looking harried. "Mr. Cooper," she said briskly, "I need you to look at these." She spread documents across his coffee table, financial reports, passenger satisfaction surveys, and maintenance records spanning the past 5 years. "What am I looking at?" "Evidence." Catherine's eyes gleamed. "Elena's been gathering it for months. The merger isn't about growth, it's a hostile takeover disguised as a marriage. Oceanic Ventures has been deliberately undercutting our routes, running at a loss to force us into this position." James leaned forward, studying the numbers. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. "Does Elena know you're showing me this?" "Elena's been in closed-door meetings all day. But she trusts you, and right now she needs allies." Catherine tapped a particular spreadsheet. "The board's meeting again tomorrow. Marcus is pushing to accelerate everything. The merger, the engagement announcement, all of it. He knows the rescue story has given us unexpected public attention. What does this have to do with me?" Catherine gave him a look that suggested she thought he was being deliberately dense. "You're the wild card, Mr. Cooper. The public loves you. A working-class hero who saved the cruise line princess. It's better PR than anything our marketing team could invent." James frowned. "I won't be used as a publicity stunt." "No." Catherine. "Agreed, but you might be interested in helping Elena protect her father's legacy and thousands of jobs." She pulled out another document. "This is Marcus Sterling's 5-year plan post-merger. Notice anything?" James scanned the document, his jaw tightening. The plan called for streamlining operations, corporate speak for massive layoffs. Standard class cabins would be eliminated entirely, converting all ships to premium-only service. "They're going to destroy everything Elena's father built," he said quietly. "Unless someone stops them." Catherine gathered the documents. "Elena has a plan, but she needs support at tomorrow's board meeting. The question is, Mr. Cooper, are you willing to step into the corporate arena, or will you walk away because it's not your fight?" After Catherine left, James spent hours studying the copies she'd left behind. The story they told was clear. Of corporate raiders hiding behind smiles and handshakes, of a calculated attack on a company that still believed in making dreams accessible to everyone. His phone buzzed again. A text from Elena. "I'm sorry about this morning. Can we talk?" He stared at the message for a long moment. The easy thing would be to walk away, return to his simple life of hard work and quiet dignity. But he remembered Elena's passion when she talked about making vacations accessible to everyone. Her father's vision of counting moments instead of money. "Meet me at the hidden deck," he texted back. The storm was still raging, but somehow that felt appropriate. James had spent his life building things, furniture, businesses, a reputation for quality. Now he had a chance to help build something bigger, to protect a vision he believed in. He thought about the elderly couple he'd helped with their luggage, how they'd saved for years for this one cruise. About the family he'd seen at breakfast yesterday, the parents carefully explaining to their children that they could only order the basic menu items. About Elena, fighting to preserve something more valuable than profit margins, the corporate. Games were far from his world of craftsmanship and honest labor, but sometimes, he realized, you had to play the game to protect what mattered. Rain pelted his face as he made his way to the hidden deck. It was time to stop being just a character in someone else's story and start writing his own chapter. Elena was already waiting when James reached the hidden deck, sheltered from the rain by the overhanging roof. She had shed her corporate armor, wearing simple jeans and a sweater, her hair damp from the storm. Her eyes showed the strain of the day's battles. "I thought you might not come," she said softly. "Catherine showed me the documents." James moved to stand beside her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "About Marcus. The merger. I've been trying to fight this battle alone for so long, I forgot how to ask for help." She turned to face him. "My father believed that a cruise should be a chance for anyone to feel like royalty, if only for a week. Marcus wants to turn that dream into an exclusive club." Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating her determined expression. "I have a plan," she continued, "but I'll need your help. It's not fair to drag you into this. I'm already in it," James interrupted. "The question is, what do you need me to do?" Relief flooded her face. She pulled out a tablet, bringing up a presentation. "Tomorrow's board meeting is crucial. Marcus thinks he has the votes locked up, but he's underestimated. How many employees are still loyal to my father's vision? We've been gathering support quietly. The crew members," James realized. "That's why you were traveling incognito. You were building alliances." Elena nodded. "Every department head, every ship captain, every port manager who believes in what we stand for. They're ready to stand with us, but we need something more. A face for the resistance, someone who represents everything Marcus wants to destroy." "Me," James said flatly. "You, the craftsman who built luxury furniture that lasted generations, who now works 3 jobs to honor his obligations, who jumped into the ocean to save a stranger without thinking about reward or recognition." She touched his arm. "You're everything my father believed in. Quality, integrity, the dignity of hard work." Thunder rumbled overhead as James considered her words. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A different kind of merger, not with Oceanic Ventures, but with the people who make this company work. Employee stock ownership, profit sharing, a commitment to maintaining affordable options alongside luxury services." Her eyes lit up as she outlined her vision. "We can prove that quality and accessibility aren't mutually exclusive." They spent the next hour planning, Elena's tablet filling with notes. As they developed their strategy, James contributed insights from his years of balancing craftsmanship with business reality, while Elena's deep knowledge of the industry helped shape their proposal. "The board won't like it," James warned. "Some won't," Elena agreed, "but not. All of them were happy about selling to Marcus. They just didn't see another option." She straightened, a familiar determination settling over her shoulders. "Now we'll give them one." A soft knock interrupted them. Catherine entered, carrying fresh coffee and more documents. "The crew representatives are ready," she reported, "and I've confirmed our allies on the board will be present tomorrow." Elena took a deep breath. "Then we're set," she turned to James. "Last chance to back out. Once we do this, Marcus will come after you with everything he has." James thought about his failed business, about the lessons learned from watching his father's legacy crumble, about the chance to be part of building something that mattered. "I'm not backing out." The storm was beginning to ease, the thunder growing distant. Elena's tablet chimed with incoming messages, supporters confirming their positions, crew members pledging their backing, pieces falling into place. "Get some rest," Elena told him. "Tomorrow will be intense." But as she turned to leave, James caught her arm. "Elena, the engagement was never real," she said quietly. "Just another corporate transaction, one I'm not willing to make." Their eyes met, holding for a moment heavy with unspoken possibilities. Catherine cleared her throat pointedly. "The media's waiting for comment on the engagement rumors. What should I tell them?" Eleanor's smile held a touch of mischief. Tell them the truth is more interesting than they know, and they'll want to watch tomorrow's board meeting very carefully." As James watched Elena leave, he felt a familiar sensation in his hands, the same anticipation he used to feel before starting a new piece of furniture, when the raw materials held endless possibilities. Tomorrow would be about building something new, something that could last generations. The storm had passed, leaving behind air fresh with possibility. In less than 24 hours, they would either save Elena's father's legacy or lose everything trying. The boardroom was packed to capacity. News of the emergency meeting had spread, drawing major shareholders and media representatives who crowded the observation area behind glass panels. Marcus Sterling sat with his lawyers, radiating confident, affluence in his $1,000 suit. Elena's uncle Theodore nervously shuffled papers while board members whispered among themselves. James stood at the back, wearing the same blue suit from his first press conference. Catherine had positioned key crew members and department heads strategically around the room. The air crackled with tension as everyone waited for Elena. She entered exactly on time, carrying a single folder. Gone was any trace of the vulnerable woman from the hidden deck. This Elena Morgan moved with the authority of someone who knew exactly what she was fighting for. "Before we begin," Marcus spoke first, his tone smoothly cordial, "I believe congratulations are in order. The press release about our engagement will not be issued." Elena cut him off crisply. "In fact, there are several things that won't be happening today." Marcus's smile tightened. "Darling, we've discussed this. The merger is a hostile takeover poorly disguised as a business arrangement." Elena opened her folder. "Let's stop pretending, shall we? Your company has been deliberately undercutting our routes for the past 18 months, operating at a loss to drive down our stock price." Murmurs rippled through the room. Elena continued, her voice clear and steady. "You've been buying shares through shell companies, positioning for this moment. The marriage proposal was just window dressing for a corporate raid." "These are serious accusations," Marcus's lawyer interjected. "They're documented facts." Elena nodded to Catherine, who began distributing papers to the board members. Full evidence of price manipulation, hidden stock purchases, and the planned dismantling of our standard class services. Theodore Morgan's face had gone pale as he reviewed the documents. "Marcus, is this true? You plan to eliminate our affordable cabins?" "It's basic business sense," Marcus snapped, his charming facade cracking. "Luxury services are where the real profit lies. All this talk about accessible dreams is cutting into margins." James stepped forward. "Those margins represent families who save for years to take one cruise, parents who want their children to see the world, hardworking people who deserve a chance at luxury, even if only for a week." "And what would you know about luxury?" Marcus sneered. "You're a failed businessman playing at being relevant." "I know that true luxury isn't about exclusion," James replied evenly. "It's about creating something of real value, something that enriches lives. I learned that crafting furniture. Elena's father built this company on the same principle." Elena took control again. "We have a different proposal for the board." She pressed a button, bringing up a presentation on the wall screens. "A restructuring that maintains our commitment to all passengers while actually increasing profitability." For the next 20 minutes, she outlined their plan. Employee stock ownership, innovative service tiers, operational efficiencies that didn't sacrifice quality. James provided practical insights from his business experience, while department heads stepped forward to offer supporting data. "This is absurd," Marcus interrupted. "The votes are already secured. The merger may be in violation of antitrust regulations." A new voice spoke from the doorway. A woman in a severe suit entered, followed by two colleagues. "Department of Justice," she announced. "We've been investigating reports of price manipulation and anti-competitive practices." The room erupted into chaos. Marcus's lawyers huddled around him, urgently whispering, while board members exchanged alarmed looks. Through it all, Elena stood calmly at the head of the table, her eyes meeting James's with the smallest hint of a smile. The showdown was far from over, but the first shots had been fired, and judging by Marcus's thunderous expression, they had hit their mark. Marcus Sterling rose from his chair, his composure finally shattering. "This is a setup. You've been planning this all along, haven't you, Elena? Using this handyman to create some romantic publicity stunt while you conspired with regulators?" "The only conspiracy here was yours," Elena replied calmly. "I simply chose to protect my father's legacy instead of selling it to the highest bidder." The Department of Justice representative stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, I suggest you and your lawyers cooperate fully. We have substantial evidence of price fixing and market manipulation." As Marcus and his legal team were escorted from the room, Theodore Morgan cleared his throat. "The merger vote is clearly postponed, but we still need to address the company's direction. Elena, your alternative proposal is ready for an immediate vote," Catherine interjected, distributing more documents. "All shareholders are present or connected virtually, including our employee stock ownership representatives." James watched as Elena commanded the room, presenting detailed projections and answering questions with unwavering confidence. This was her element, he realized. Not the corporate politics and social maneuvering, but the actual work of building something meaningful. "The numbers are promising," Anderson admitted grudgingly, "but this is a radical departure from traditional cruise line operations. The risk is less than the risk of betraying our core mission," Elena interrupted. "Every person who steps onto our ships is entrusting us with their dreams, whether they saved for years for a basic cabin or casually booked a luxury suite. They deserve our best." She turned to James. "Mr. Cooper understands this better than most. His furniture business proved that quality and accessibility aren't mutually exclusive. Each piece was an investment, but one that brought real value to its owners. We can operate on the same principle." James stepped forward. "A cheap table that falls apart in a year isn't a bargain. Neither is a cruise line that sacrifices long-term loyalty for short-term profits. I've seen both sides of this equation, building luxury items and struggling to afford basic experiences. There's a balance to be found." The board members murmured among themselves. Finally, Theodore spoke. Perhaps we've lost sight of what made this company successful in the first place. My brother, Elena's father, never saw luxury as something exclusive. He saw it as something transformative." "Then let's vote," Elena said quietly. "Not just the board, but all shareholders. Let's decide what kind of company we want to be." The next hour was tense as votes were tallied. James stood by Elena, close enough to feel her trembling slightly despite her outward calm. Without thinking, he took her hand. She gripped it tightly, neither of them caring about the cameras capturing the moment through the glass panels. When the final count was announced, Elena's plan had won by a narrow margin. The room burst into applause, led by the crew members and department heads who had supported her vision. Theodore approached them, looking both chastened and proud. "Your father would have approved," he told Elena, "both of the plan and of him." He nodded toward James before walking away. The boardroom gradually emptied as people left to handle press statements and begin implementing the new directives. Soon only Elena and James remained, still holding hands. "I couldn't have done this without you," Elena said softly. "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." James turned to face her. "The job offer, does it still stand?" "After all this, it had better," she smiled. "Though the title needs updating, how does Executive Director of Guest Experience and Innovation sound?" "It sounds like a mouthful." He pulled her closer. "But I'm more interested in what happens next with us." "Well, I'm still technically engaged to a man who's probably facing federal charges," she teased, "though I suppose that's not legally binding since I never actually said yes." "Elena Morgan," James said seriously, "I'm a simple furniture maker who works too hard and takes too much pride in doing things right. I'm not rich or powerful or—" She stopped him with a kiss. When they finally parted, her eyes were shining. You're the man who jumped into the ocean to save a stranger then. Jumped into a corporate battle to save a dream. You're exactly who I want you to be. Through the boardroom windows, they could see the ocean stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there, Elena's lost notebook floated with its lists of improvements and dreams. But now they had the chance to write a new chapter together, to build something that would last longer than any furniture or cruise ship. A legacy of making dreams accessible to everyone who dared to reach for them. The changes at Morgan Cruise Lines made headlines for weeks. Cruise line revolutionizes industry standards, declared the Wall Street Journal, while social media buzzed with the romantic story of the craftsman and the heiress. Marcus Sterling's indictment on federal charges became a footnote to the larger story of corporate transformation. James's first initiative as executive director was to redesign the standard cabins, applying his furniture-making expertise to maximize both comfort and efficiency. Elena worked alongside him, their partnership extending seamlessly from personal to professional. Together, they proved that luxury wasn't about exclusivity. It was about creating experiences that everyone could treasure. The transformation of Morgan Cruise Lines became a case study in corporate innovation. James's practical experience combined with Elena's industry knowledge created a unique approach to luxury travel. They introduced modular cabin designs that could be customized based on passenger preferences, allowing even budget travelers to add personal touches to their space. The employee stock ownership program flourished, with crew members taking unprecedented pride in their roles. Stories circulated about housekeepers going above and beyond, maintenance staff innovating new solutions, and dining staff creating memorable experiences for families on tight budgets. Elena's father's vision of counting moments instead of money became the company's new motto. Customer satisfaction scores soared across all cabin classes, and booking rates for standard cabins reached record highs. Industry analysts who had initially criticized the rejection of the merger were now praising the company's innovative approach. James found himself traveling between ships, overseeing renovations and training programs. His background in craftsmanship brought a fresh perspective to marine architecture, and his experience with financial struggles helped him understand exactly what budget-conscious travelers needed. He never forgot his own first impression of the cruise ship, using those memories to ensure every passenger felt valued from the moment they stepped aboard. The media dubbed their approach democratic luxury, and other cruise lines began to take notice. While competitors scrambled to copy their success, Morgan Cruise Lines continued to innovate, always staying one step ahead in their mission to make dreams accessible to all. Life had a way of coming full circle, James reflected, as he stood on the hidden deck of the majestic Dawn, 6 months after the fateful rescue. The ship had just completed its first major renovation under the new initiative, and he and Elena had sneaked away from the celebration to share a quiet moment in their special spot. "Remember the first time we met here?" Elena asked, leaning against the railing. She was wearing casual clothes again, having shed her corporate attire after the day's ceremonies. "You were so determined not to accept any help or recognition, and you were trying to solve everything on your own," he replied, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We were quite a pair." The transformation of their relationship had been as remarkable as that of the company. They worked together seamlessly. During the day, his practical knowledge complementing her industry expertise. In the evenings, they'd talk for hours about their visions for the future, both personal and professional. Their different backgrounds, which some had seen as an insurmountable barrier, proved to be their greatest strength. Sarah had become a frequent visitor to the corporate offices, her natural warmth and people skills making her an invaluable consultant. On family-friendly initiatives, she never tired of reminding James that her gift of a cruise ticket had changed not just his life, but the entire industry. The crew had embraced James as one of their own, appreciating how he'd risen from the standard. cabins to the boardroom without losing his understanding of hard work and simple dignity. His furniture-making skills found new expression in custom designs for public spaces, creating comfortable areas where passengers of all classes could mingle freely. Elena's uncle Theodore had finally retired, admitting that the company was in better hands under the new leadership. The board members who had initially opposed their vision now proudly touted its success, though Anderson still occasionally grumbled about excessive democratization of luxury services. "I got a letter today," Elena said, pulling an envelope from her pocket, "from a single mother who saved for 3 years to take her kids on our cruise. She said it was the first time she didn't feel second class because of her budget." James smiled, remembering his own discomfort those first days as a standard-class passenger. "That's what your father meant about counting moments, isn't it?" "Yes, but it's also what you taught me about true craftsmanship. That quality isn't about the price tag, it's about the care you put into creating something meaningful." She turned in his arms to face him. "Speaking of which, I found your old workshop's location," James stilled. "Elena, the building's for sale. The tools are long gone, but the space is still perfect for furniture making." Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "I thought maybe, as a side project, that we could create a line of custom furniture for the ships, something that combines your craftsmanship with our new approach to accessible luxury." The idea hit him like a wave of possibility. The chance to work with wood again, to create lasting pieces while still maintaining his role in the cruise line, to bring his past and present together in a way that honored both. "You never stop dreaming bigger, do you?" he asked softly. "Not anymore." She reached up to touch his face. "You taught me that some risks are worth taking. Jumping into the ocean, fighting for what you believe in, loving someone who challenges everything you thought you knew about class and worth." Above them, the stars were emerging in the darkening sky, just as they had that first night of honest conversation. But now there was no storm approaching, no hidden engagements or corporate battles looming. Just two people who had found in each other the perfect balance of dreams and practicality, of luxury and accessibility, of love and purpose. 1 year after the rescue, the Majestic Dawn hosted a special anniversary cruise. The passenger list included families from all walks of life, from first-time cruisers in standard cabins to long-time luxury travelers. The ship had become a symbol of the company's transformation, featuring James's redesigned spaces and Elena's innovative service programs. The couple stood at the helm with Captain Reynolds, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar hues of orange and gold, the same colors that had filled the sky the night of the rescue, though everything else had changed so dramatically since then. "Our occupancy rates are at an all-time high," Elena reported, reviewing the latest figures on her tablet. "But more importantly, our passenger satisfaction scores are unprecedented across all cabin classes." James nodded, noting the careful craftsmanship of the newly installed observation deck below, where passengers gathered to watch dolphins playing in the ship's wake. The wood railings bore the distinctive touches of his restored workshop, now operating as a training center for aspiring craftspeople who created custom pieces for the entire fleet. The workshop's revival had become a story of its own. Local youth programs brought students to learn traditional woodworking skills alongside modern design techniques. Many graduates went on to work for the cruise line, either crafting furniture or applying their understanding of quality and attention to detail to other aspects of ship operations. Catherine, now Vice President of Operations, approached with a stack of letters. "More testimonials from our passengers. This one's particularly interesting." She handed Elena a carefully handwritten note. Elena read it aloud. 20 years ago, I worked as a housekeeper, watching wealthy passengers enjoy luxuries I could only dream of. Today, I brought my grandchildren on their first cruise, staying in a comfortable cabin that I could afford on my retirement savings. Thank you for making this possible. James felt the impact of those words deeply. His own sister Sarah had recently launched a program helping other working-class families plan and save for their dream vacations, turning his original budget cruise experience into an opportunity for countless others. The media still loved to tell their story, the craftsman and the heiress who had revolutionized luxury travel. But the real story was in moments like these, in the faces of children seeing the ocean for the first time, in elderly couples celebrating anniversaries they'd saved years to commemorate, in families creating memories they'd once thought beyond their reach. "Your father would be proud," Captain Reynolds said quietly to Elena. "Not just of the company's success, but of how you've proven that doing good business and doing good can be the same thing." The harbour lights were emerging as dusk settled, guiding them toward their next port of call. Each light represented another destination, another opportunity to demonstrate that dreams didn't have to be exclusive to be luxurious. Elena slipped her hand into James's, their matching wedding rings, catching the last rays of sunlight. They had chosen to be married in a simple ceremony on this very deck 6 months ago, surrounded by crew members and family, with passengers from all classes joining in the celebration. It had set the perfect tone for their shared vision: elegance without exclusivity, quality without pretension, love without boundaries. As the majestic dawn approached the exact coordinates where James had made his life-changing dive, the ship slowed to a ceremonial stop. The spot was now marked by a small buoy, a reminder of where one man's courage and one woman's vision had transformed an industry. James and Elena stood at the stern, in the precise location where their story had begun. The setting sun painted the sky in familiar colors, but this time Elena wore a simple diamond ring that caught the fading light, and James stood not as a struggling passenger, but as a man who had found his true purpose. "I had everything planned." That night," Elena reminisced, leaning against the railing, "all my notes about improving passenger experience, my strategies for fighting the merger, my dreams for the company's future, and then I dropped them all into the ocean." "Sometimes losing your plans makes room for better ones," James replied, pulling her close. "Though I wouldn't recommend testing that theory with another swim." Elena laughed, then grew serious. "You know what I was writing in that notebook just before it fell? I was describing a dream about making luxury accessible to everyone, about honoring Dad's vision in a modern way. I thought I'd lost that dream along with those notes. Instead, you found someone who shared it." James turned her to face him. "Which is why I brought you here today. I've been working on something." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, handcrafted wooden box. The wood was salvaged from the original majestic dawn railings, lovingly restored and transformed in his workshop. Inside lay a simple piece of paper. "Our next project," he explained as Elena unfolded it. "A foundation to help small business owners who've faced setbacks, combining your business expertise with my experience of starting over. Because sometimes people just need a chance to rebuild their dreams." Elena's eyes filled with tears as she read the proposal. The foundation would offer not just financial support, but mentorship, training, and a path toward dignified recovery. It was everything they believed in about making opportunities accessible, wrapped in a deeply personal understanding of both struggle and success. "It's perfect," she whispered. "A chance to help others write their own second chapters." Below them, the ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, its waves carrying countless stories of challenges and triumphs, endings and beginnings. The same waters that had nearly claimed Elena's life had instead given them both a new one, teaching them that sometimes the most precious things come not from careful planning, but from the courage to take unexpected plunges. As the ship's horn sounded and they began moving forward again, James and Elena remained at the railing, watching the buoy disappear into the distance. They had learned that true luxury wasn't about gold-plated fixtures or premium suites. It was about creating moments that transformed lives, about building something lasting from life's unexpected turns, about finding in each other the perfect balance of dreams and reality. The story of the struggling man who saved a drowning girl had evolved into something far richer, a testament to the power of seeing value in everyone's dreams, of building bridges between worlds, of proving that the most meaningful journeys often begin with a single brave decision to dive into unknown waters. And as the stars began to emerge above them, James and Elena Morgan Cooper stood together at the intersection of their past and future, ready to help others discover that sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't about the price you pay, but the courage to believe in something bigger than yourself.